The guy from Outlander made a game, and I spent more than 300 hours playing it, so here's what I think.
So you want to join the Hopeport Town Guard?
The morning the game came out, I was fully prepared. I set an alarm to wake up when the game launched at 5 a.m. so I could reserve a good name. Non-members get a battle tag, but you can reserve a unique name by paying for a subscription. I'll talk more on that later when I get to the members-only content. I have really high hopes for this game and plan on putting hundreds of hours into it just to see what the game really has to offer. This game is not designed like many others, so the interface and server mechanics are definitely hit or miss. Personally, I'm reminded of old-school RPGs like Baldur's Gate. Everything has a tiled, tabletop game-inspired aesthetic. Each area is split into these rooms. I can't see into the next room, but the transition between them is seamless. This is one thing that I know a lot of people dislike about the game, but the more I play it, the more it grows on me. I think it's good for games to have their own unique style, even if it's really different from the norm. Hold on, can I pet that cat? Starting off strong, I'm introduced to the fast travel system, a teleport spell that's usable at any time to return to any portal stone I've discovered. I'm then given the Sense spell, which reveals every object in my current location that can be interacted with, followed by the Quartermaster spell, which will become relevant later when I continue past Act 1. Embarrassingly enough, I got stuck here for more than a few minutes. Goblins are attacking the town and I need to find another guard's bow. The quest in Brighter Shores won't hold your hand. I don't get an icon on my map or an arrow telling me where to go next. I guess I have to actually pay attention and read the quest logs. Oh. Combat is extremely basic. I click an enemy, decide which weapon I want to fight them with, and then wait. But I only have one weapon at the moment, so there's 0 decision points. Weapons only have 2 visible stats. One is the weapon's damage, and one is a percentage chance for the weapon to do a specific type of elemental damage. After each fight, my health is immediately restored to full so I can attack the next enemy straight away. Time for my first look at non-combat skills. The captain is hurt and I need to craft him a health potion using alchemy. First I need to gather some kelp through the forager skill. On my way to the beach, some goblins put me in a self-defense situation and I'm forced to defend myself. Now I just scrape some dirty seaweed off the sand. This will do perfectly. After giving the potion to the captain, I'm given the last spell, Immunity. This has a roughly 3-second cast time and makes it so no enemies can attack me for a short period of time. Casting the spell is also the only way to leave combat since all doors in the current room lock during combat.
I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me!
I'm then told in order to move on to Act 2, I need a total level of 60, as well as completion of bow training, which requires level 15 in the combat skill. Starting off leveling my combat first, and I immediately notice an annoying quirk with the room system. There are no servers. Every time I enter a room, I'm put into an instance of that room with other random players. The max amount of players in any given room depends on the number of resource nodes in that room. In this low-level combat area, there are 6 enemies, so it caps at 6 players in the room. But this means the room is always full, and we have to sit here and wait for a respective enemy to respawn between each kill. Every popular combat training area has this issue, but it's alleviated later on when I have more choices on where to train. Waiting for respawns gets boring fast, so I'm going to check out my other skills. Fish that I catch can be sold to a vendor or cooked. Cooking requires other materials in addition to the fish, which have to be bought from a vendor outside the kitchen. All the ingredients for non-fish recipes can be bought from this vendor, so it's a lot easier to just sell my fish and then use that money to buy whatever materials I need for cooking. This makes fishing feel like its only purpose is making money, but that's fine, you need a way to make money in the game. I finished my first meal and then realized there's no option to use the food. You can't eat it. The only thing you can do with your completed meals is sell them to the chef right there in the kitchen. They sell for more than the cost of the raw materials from the vendor, but not being able to use the food means that just like the fishing skill, the only purpose of cooking is to make money. So now I'm realizing that 2 of the 5 skills don't have any interaction with the other skills, or at best, fishing and cooking are a closed loop. When I say 2 of 5 skills, I don't mean that there are only 5 skills in the game, but in this first act. Brighter Shores has the strangest system of progression I've ever seen in an MMO. There are 4 acts currently in the game with plans to continually add more. Each act has its own skills that you can only utilize in that act. There is some interaction between acts later on, like gathering alchemy or cooking supplies in Act 2, but for the most part the acts are completely separated. Each act even has its own combat skill. They're all exactly alike in every way except in name, but you'll need different gear for each act. The Quartermaster spell I learned earlier is used to instantly store and equip gear in different acts. Most people's instinct when playing games structured this way is to complete all of the side content before moving on with the main story. Very early on, I hit a wall with one quest where I needed level 25 fishing. This isn't an insane grind, it's maybe 2 hours, but that's a big time investment to request of someone who's only been playing the game for an hour or two so far. I move on to my next quest, and halfway through that one I hit a wall where I need 50 alchemy and 61 cooking. The main quest doesn't have these progression walls, and there's a reason for that. Most players were as confused as I was about the separated acts and combat skills. Then 2 days after launch, Andrew Gower wrote to the community. In his message, he urged players to, quote, "Please give it a chance." He explained that you aren't intended to finish an act before moving on. It's designed to be relatively easy to progress through the acts, opening up more of the game which you can choose to return to at any time. Acts never become redundant or dead content. This is when I realized I needed to completely change the way I'm looking at this game. The core design decisions are so different from other MMOs that I can't judge it through that lens. The town of Hopeport isn't like a zone in WoW that you level through and then never return. This game, for good or bad, is unique. There is one quest I'm able to complete right now, although I don't really consider it a side quest because it introduces a key game mechanic. Each act has an obelisk, and I'm tasked with repairing the one in Hopeport. What's an obelisk? Well, sometimes weapons and armor drop unattuned. I can attune them by using them on an obelisk, which locks them to that act. This makes it so I can use equipment drops from one act in a different one. For example, if I get a rare weapon drop in Act 4 and it's worse than my Act 4 weapon but better than my Act 2 weapon, I can use that weapon on the Act 2 obelisk. I did end up utilizing this mechanic multiple times. This quest was also my first peek at the class system, which will be introduced in a later act. So back to the main quest. 15 combat and 60 total level doesn't take long at all, and it's enough for me to get a good introduction to each of the skills. Turning in that quest is the end of Act 1. That was surprisingly short, but I guess it makes sense with what Andrew Gower said about the way you're meant to progress through the game. The quest reward is enough experience to take my combat level to 20, which means I'm now introduced to knowledge points. Knowledge is gained from every single activity that grants experience, and when I reach 100%, I'm given a point. There are a few uses for these. First, they can be spent to unlock passive activities that I can have my character perform while I'm offline for slow but free experience. I remember reading a while ago that this passive training mechanic was meant as a way to curb botting, but the passive experience rates are so minuscule that I do not see that working. Second, and what I spent the vast majority of my points on, is a decent chunk of experience in any skill over level 20. By the time I finished Act 4, my second highest skill was the one that I was just dumping all of my knowledge points into. The last thing you can spend them on is money, but that's such a small amount that it feels like a complete waste to pick that over the experience. Act 2 takes place in the forest surrounding the town from Act 1. It starts with tracking down some fellow guards until I stumble across a dryad in a clearing. She needs me to kill a level 10 stag that's been corrupted. A level 10 enemy should be easy, after all I just hit level 20 in my combat skill after completing the previous quest. But because each act has a different combat skill and my gear from the previous act is useless here, I have to start from scratch. The level 0 enemies in this act are right next to the obelisk, so I can immediately attune any gear that drops. Getting level 10 only took me about 20 minutes. I go back to the clearing, kill the stag, and the dryad leads me to a cave where I'm introduced to this game's class system. It's really strange that the class system is introduced this late into the game. Most games have you pick your class at character creation, and I've played a few where you pick at the end of the tutorial, but never one where the choice is made after several hours. There's 3 classes to choose from: Hammer Mage, Guardian, and Cryo Knight. What's the difference between them? Good question. Each class has its own aesthetic. Hammer Mages use armor made from stone, Cryo Knights metal, and Guardians bone. They each also have an elemental weakness, and that's it, for right now at least. Special attacks aren't in the game yet, so when you're picking a class, you're basically just picking cosmetics and a weakness. Pretty underwhelming for what the game's lore makes out to be an incredibly important choice. I picked Hammer Mage because the Cryo Knight gave me an attitude and the Guardian is a godless hippie. Also, lightning powers are rad. Now that I've been inducted into a cult, the Dryad needs me to find some magical items scattered around Act 2. This isn't really difficult at all, and as soon as I'm done, I'm greeted with another hard wall. I now need a Hope Forest level of 60 and a total level of 153 to progress to Act 3. This felt like it was barely longer than Act 1. That's fine though, I haven't touched any of the Act 2 skills, so now I have a reason to. And this is where the game nearly lost me. I started with woodcutting, which mechanically is identical to fishing. One click on a fish or a tree for one resource, wait for respawns, bank or sell to the vendor, repeat. This one's understandable at least. I guess there's not many ways to make gathering skills different. At least harpooning a fish and swinging an axe at a tree are extremely different thematically. But forager and gatherer are actually indistinguishable. Potatoes, forager. Leeks, gatherer. Periwinkle, forager. Dandelion, gatherer, dummy. At first, carpenter seems like it's going to be the saving grace. Tell me where you've heard this one before. You can cut trees to use with the carpenter skill, but it's much more efficient to just buy logs from the vendor outside. Then once you craft the items, the only thing you can do is sell them to the vendor inside the crafting area. It's cooking. It's a 1-to-1 reskin of cooking from Act 1. Scout is guard, gatherer is forager, woodcutting is fishing, carpentry is cooking. There is not a single mechanically unique skill in Act 2. One thing I haven't even mentioned yet is how higher level nodes work. At combat level 0 in Act 2, I can start out fighting goblins. When I reach combat level 12, I can fight higher level goblins. Where are the higher level goblins? Well, right here. They're the same enemies. They've just leveled up with me. I can choose to continue fighting the lower level goblins by right-clicking them and selecting previous actions, but this just kills my sense of progression. I see other players at combat level 200 fighting the same enemies I am at level 20. This happens with any type of gathering node as well. At level 2 fishing, I'm catching lesser eels. At level 8, they become gray eels, and at 16, they're now rocky eels. This really contributes to the samey feeling of all of the skills. There's just such a massive lack of variety. At this point, I'm just wondering if every act is going to be the same reskin skills. I already know there's going to be a new combat skill. I really feel like this is a point where a lot of people would have quit. I made it this far, I'm at least going to see it through to the end of the acts that are currently in the game. As with any new game, I've come across a lot of little annoyances, things like awkward controls and clunky interfaces. One thing that gave me hope for the future of this game and convinced me to see it through is the immediate response from the development team regarding these. Within a day of launch, there was already a quality of life patch addressing some of the biggest issues. A day later, there was another. It's been weeks now, and almost every single day has had a new patch fixing small issues that players have had with the game. Adding things like being able to click on your minimap to move to the next room. Not good enough? Alright, the next day's patch lets you move 2 rooms with the map. Don't like navigating an interface for literally every action? Boom, single click actions. It's crazy how fast some of these problems were addressed. It's like Andrew Gower is sitting at his desk furiously refreshing Reddit, waiting for someone to dare to complain. This level of responsiveness really shows a passion for the game he's created. My faith in the team behind it is one of the main reasons I'm pushing through. I'm finished the grind and can finally start Act 3, The Mines. I do really like how every act so far has had a very different setting. No matter where I am, I can easily tell which act I'm in. Brighter Shore's grid-based tile aesthetic fits the mines extremely well. You can really tell what they were going for here with the D&D style tabletop theme. Act 3's story revolves around finding the source of the corruption and putting a stop to it. But first I want to check out this act's skills because I need to know if it's going to be the same thing again. There's 5 skills this time compared to the 4 in Act 2. The first is obviously this act's combat skill. The second is mining, which functions the same as other resource skills like woodcutting or fishing. And the last 3 are the production skills, blacksmith, stonemason, and bonewright, which are used to make armor and weapons for their respective class. The production skills in practice function a lot like cooking. You gather or buy raw materials, craft the items, and then sell them. There is, however, one massive difference here. The weapons and armor you craft can actually be used. There's a real tangible reward from these skills other than making money or gaining levels. So the skills here aren't extremely different, but they're definitely better. In the first 2 acts, whenever I was training a resource gathering skill, a bank was never too far away. Now that I want to train mining in Act 3, whenever my inventory fills up, I have to run through 10 rooms, multiple of which contain aggressive enemies that lock me into combat. I did hear about a solution to this issue. Back in Act 2, there's a side quest to rescue a fellow guard from a giant spider. A section of this quest requires me to craft a specific shield, which requires 32 carpentry. At this point, my highest skill is in the low 20s, so this is going to be a grind. And it was. That took me pretty much an entire Saturday, but I finally have the level I need to finish up this quest. I'm kind of embarrassed at how long this quest took me. I didn't want to just look up a guide, and there was one puzzle that had me stumped for a while. I really enjoyed it though. I miss actually needing to think in games. There aren't many quests in Brighter Shores, and you have to do some serious grinding to be able to complete them, but the quests themselves really are incredible classic RPG experiences. Now for the entire reason I wanted to do this quest. Since my first hour playing this game all the way back in Act 1, I've been finding strange stones on the ground. It turns out these can be used as deposit boxes for banks. This unlock turns my mining bank route from 10 rooms to 1. This seems like such a core feature that it's weird such a long grind was required to unlock it. If another player hadn't told me about this, I could have gone hundreds of hours running a marathon to bank every single time. It feels like the game is trying to filter out players who don't like to grind. I've been leveling my Act 3 skills for a while, so I feel like it's time to get back to the main quest. This act has hands down been my favorite one so far. Multiple sections of the quest have me returning to the previous acts, which has done a great job of making them feel connected. This act is also much longer than the previous two, so I've actually had time to get invested. I think this room was the highlight of Act 3 for me. I need an item that's being guarded by a giant slumbering spider. If I step on the wrong tile, it wakes up and sends me back to the beginning of the room. But I'm not alone in here. I'm working together with other people to figure out the path through this room. This whole section was fantastic. It encourages you to be social and cooperate with other players, but doesn't outright force you to. I ended up reaching the end first, but I stuck around to make sure my new friend made it to safety. This was a classic MMO experience. At this point, my opinion of the game is so much higher than it was at the end of Act 2. It feels like the game is finally starting to find its footing. Reaching the end of this act, I'm of course greeted by another level requirement to progress, but for the first time I don't have to go back and grind. I've been enjoying this act so much that I already have all the levels I need of my own volition. The rewards from the skills themselves were enough to make me want to do them. The entrance to Act 4 is located in Hope Forest, which is Act 2. This is a small thing, but I like this because it makes my movement through the world feel less linear. The setting this time is a massive city named Chronopolis. So we've had a small seaside town, a forest, a mine, and now a major city. That's a pretty varied selection of scenery. The bulk of the main story quest in this act is collecting a list of items to join the Merchants Guild. One of the items is a bottle of Water of Delight, which needs to be taken from a fountain in some guy's mansion. But I can't just stroll into his home. I need to sneak my way in, and for that, I need a disguise. My plan of action is obvious. First, I buy some soap. Then I go to his servant's house, spill food on him, steal his uniform while he's showering, use the soap to clean the uniform, and then go back to the mansion where the guards now let me in. A foolproof scheme executed perfectly. Not every item on the list is that convoluted, but figuring this one out made me feel great. Some of the other items on the list naturally introduce you to the Act 4 skills. Leatherworker is a production skill that functions a lot like cooking and carpentry. I need to reach level 10 to make a leatherworker's patch for the list. Next, I need 2 items that require level 6 and level 8 merchant to buy. This skill has a completely unique gameplay loop. I take contracts from the bounty board at the Merchants Guild, which tells me what products I need to buy and where to sell them. So for example, I need to buy soap from the soap stall and sell it to the meat stall. I can have 6 contracts at a time, and the board refreshes with new contracts every few minutes. So to level as fast as possible, I need to memorize the location of each stall as well as what each stall wants to buy. Then I have to optimize my route around the city so I can turn in all 6 of my contracts and get back to the Merchants Guild before the next refresh. The last milestone I have is to reach level 16 Detective. This skill starts off as boring as possible. I have to catch thieves. That sounds exciting, right? Well, what catching thieves translates to in Brighter Shores is staring at a single spot until an NPC walks over and does the most cartoonishly exaggerated animation to telegraph that they're about to yoink some shit. Then it's a single click and they're off to jail. I really can't force myself to do this for more than a few minutes, so now that I'm level 4, I want to check out crime den raids. And what? This is so much cooler than what I was doing. Not only that, but I can train 2 skills at the same time this way. This just went from my least favorite to probably my favorite skill in the game. Why didn't they lead with this? Thematically and lore-wise, it makes sense for Merchant and Detective to take place in Act 4, but it's a shame that the 2 most mechanically deep and interesting skills are far enough in the game that a lot of people are going to quit before they ever see them. At this point, I am fully sold on Brighter Shores. I'm really glad I stuck to it and pushed through the early roadblocks because quests and skills have just gotten better and better with each act. I now have all the items from the Merchant Guild list, so I turn them in to complete the quest, and my reward: you will be able to freely trade once player-to-player trading is actually implemented into the game. Okay, I knew trading as a feature wasn't in the game yet, but I had no idea that you would need to complete 4 entire acts of content, potentially several dozen hours of game time just to unlock it. That's so strange. I guess it makes sense. It seems like it would be a really good countermeasure against gold farmers, and I haven't really hit a point yet where I need to trade anyone. Alright, let's wrap up this act. I need to continue to Stonemaul Hill, but the sentries won't let me through until I recover a golden cog that was stolen from them by the most evil-sounding man ever, Hellfar the Night Crow. I return to Act 2, finally rescue my fellow guard Toblain from a giant spider, and with his help we infiltrate Hellfar's compound, grab the cog, and Toblain is revealed to be a dragon or something. What? I know I've skipped over a lot of minor story beats, but I promise that came out of absolutely nowhere. I'll roll with it, I guess. I take the cog back to the entrance to Stonemaul Hill, and that's where the story ends for now. I think the best word to describe Brighter Shores is weird. Now, that isn't a slight against the game. It's the opposite, actually. This game is a completely unique experience in the MMO landscape. I'm fully aware that some of the weird aspects on this game that sold me on it turned a lot of people off. From the aesthetic that's heavily inspired by tabletop RPGs to the insane grind and the bare bones combat, I wouldn't blame someone for not liking this game. There were multiple points where I could understand someone dropping the game for good. My personal biggest gripe with the game is the lack of interaction between skills in different acts. There is some, like gathering alchemy supplies in Act 2 or crafting gear to attune in any act, but there could be so much more. Why can I only cut down trees, fish, or mine in one area? Luckily, that's something that could easily be implemented in the future. And I am very hopeful for the future of Brighter Shores. The team behind it has shown that they're listening to player feedback. Within a few weeks, they've already implemented features from their roadmap like leaderboards. The core of what is in the game is already extremely solid. This feels like much more of a traditional RPG than an MMO. The quests are actually quests. They aren't just there to be a checklist or level up your character. If you need a specific level for a quest, it isn't just because this is a level 30 quest. It's because there's a good reason for your character to be skilled in that profession in order to advance the plot. I'm still playing Brighter Shores every day. I'm currently working towards the skill requirements for every side quest. After that's done, I'm going for level 500 detective unless there's a skill in a later act that I end up liking more. I'm incredibly optimistic about the future of this game, and I really want to encourage both MMO and RPG fans alike to give it a chance. I hope it grows on you like it did on me. Can you believe I got through this entire video without mentioning RuneScape?